no, I'm not having this. I'm not having this one bit. If you're gonna sleep on Gabriel Bortoleto, fine, but don't you dare make a hashtag that calls for him to be removed. Because as I'm about to yap on about, we have seen his story be played out before, many times. And I'm not talking about Oscar Piastri. Gabriel Bortoleto is in his first of at least 2 seasons with Sauber, then to be Audi, but this guy isn't some random rookie. He's the latest chap to have emulated folks like Charles Leclerc, George Russell, and indeed my boy, in being a back-to-back junior champion. And like all of them, he now finds himself in a car which is really not going to be winning him wins or championships or major points anytime soon. You know, in a car that is not really known for being quick. And okay, for my boy, I will add an asterisk there because the MCL60 did eventually get a wriggle on and start be podium worthy. But for that first half of the season, yeah, Oscar was effectively glued to the back. But yes, it's a scenario that feels all too familiar for F1 fans. A talented rookie stuck in a slow car, toiling away outside the spotlight, and then one tweet, oh, that tipped me over the edge. One of the reasons for calling for Bortoleto's removal from F1 was because he had the number 5. Really? Really? I don't know whether that was rage bait or not, but it got me up the ladder for this one. I'm not going to be naming and shaming, it's not worth it, but if you know, you know. Because I rate this chap immensely, because I was watching him throughout the entire season of F2, and now forgive me for harking back to my Dragon Ball days, but I saw throughout the entire F2 championship battle, a battle that was akin to the likes of Goku versus Frieza. Isaac Hajar being Frieza, Gabi being Goku. But it was such a fascinating story of these two personalities clashing right at the top of Formula 2, and then Bortoleto winning out right at the final race of the season. And then conversely, some of you may just simply not care. You might be thinking, oh, well, whoop-de-doo, he's in a Sauber. Why should I even be bothered with him? Well, it's because I see quite a few parallels with what we saw in the first couple of years with one George Russell who hails from King's Lynn. Another prodigious talent who has now been able to prove himself but started in similar circumstances come 2019. Albeit, according to George, with a little twist in that Lance Stroll supposedly scuppered a move for him to be destined to be starting his racing career with Force India. But then Papa Stroll buying the team out and putting Lance next to Checo, that kind of put a stop to it. Toto then had to go back to his old stomping ground of Williams because I believe he was one of the executive directors of the team. He certainly had a very high-profile job there. I said, Williams, be a buddy and just put George in the car for a little bit, yeah. I know he's a very good driver and I know that you're on hard times after Lance abandoned you. Don't worry, I got a great driver and you're totally not sloppy seconds. Although admittedly with that FW car, oh my god, it was sloppy. Meanwhile, Lance is laughing over in the corner going, thanks, Dad! Granted, there was a difference in that Gabi at least had a Sauber car to partake in winter testing in, because George's offering in 2019 for winter testing, it wasn't ready for the start of it, and that showed immediate sign that this was going to be a long year. A year which only saw Williams score 1 point, and honestly, that wasn't really something to be proud of because it was a pity point after Alfa Romeo sustained a disqualification at the really chaotic 2019 German Grand Prix. If you've not seen that race, go and watch it on archive. It was absolutely bonkers. To change up Ted's quote, cars off the track! And because Williams were pinned to the back and people just stopped caring about them, even though they were a legacy team, unless you were a die-hard fan of theirs who would stick through thick and thin, Russell out-qualified Kubica in every single race, but it didn't get any headlines at all, because it wasn't sexy enough. Because most of the coverage was focused on Valtteri Bottas 2.0, Lewis then silencing Valtteri Bottas 2.0 and going on to dominate, the infighting between Sebastian and Charles Leclerc, Lando making meme after meme and saying that the entire situation was broken. Of course, you've got Daniel going, Nico Hülkenberg. Williams were a very, very, very small footnote. That being said, Russell did come to appreciate his 3 years there, even though he also admitted that he'd spent at least 1 year too long with them in many interviews since. And then you hear that Claire Williams just couldn't bear to let him go for 2021, since quite frankly, they needed George Williams. They really needed him, like desperately so. They needed a plucky sidekick to go alongside the GOAT for 2021. The GOAT couldn't go it alone. But in truth, those years at Williams, I think forged George Russell into the fighter that he is today. He's plucky. He was a scrapper. He had to find points at any given opportunity. He had to hustle. And that hustle is paying in dividends with Mercedes. Even though there are times, quite a few times, in fact, that Mercedes, they kind of just ignore George, because there were many times in 2023 when it wasn't a very good year for Mercedes, and George was going, "Blimey, chaps, I think if we do this situation, we can get ourselves a few more points." And then they just go, "Understood, George, so box, 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 box." And then that manifested the reputation of George being a whiner on the radio, because that radio made good TV. And as we saw with the Ferraris this year, the way the team radio is used by the producers, it can be very dangerous and tarnish many reputations, so be wary of it. And while he had no chance in his first year, and then a couple of missed ones in the second season, bar his cameo for Mercedes, the Briton focused on extracting everything he could from subpar machinery and honing his technical understanding, as he details right here. I look at those years now thinking, yeah, perhaps I did learn more racing at the back compared to what some of my rivals may have done being thrown in the deep end from the beginning. Some drivers have been thrown in at the deep end early and it hurt their careers. I've got to be grateful for the people who have advised me and helped me and nurtured me to this position. Ultimately, I'm happy with where I am right now. Yeah, crucially, Russell did not let the lack of a spotlight dampen his motivation. He was not all about ego, because I could easily imagine if you were an egotistical driver and you were at the back, not getting any headlines, no one giving a damn about your name, that would have had an effect on you. Clearly, not with George. And I doubt that Gabi will experience the same thing in Europe either, because he was working, George, with an experienced teammate in Kubica for 2019. It really helped elevate his technical game, Russell has said, noting how Kubica's deep well of knowledge pushed him to learn about car setup and feedback on the granular level. Sure, Robert was compromised in that one of his arms was limited in movement and dexterity, but as we have seen, that has not stopped Kubica at all, and look what he's doing now in World Endurance with Ferrari. He's going gangbusters, and I am so happy for him. Well done, Robert. And no, that's not me patronising him, I am genuinely impressed. Because in a way, being at Williams for Russell meant extra homework and far less pressure. He wasn't expected to be getting points. It would have been a miracle if he finished any higher than 15th. Because that meant that Williams had to scrutinise every single detail in hopes for progress. And plenty of introspection and analysis since, well, there was nothing else to do. And then 2020, it technically and statistically was worse because they didn't score any points at all. Russell describing how the whole team had to find themselves a winning mindset, even though they weren't really winning anything. Not even a pity point in that second season. And like I mentioned, that mindset has carried him through very, very well. Look where he is right now. Even though he's not picking up wins, he's only had one P2 and then a smattering of podiums and top 5 finishes. He's only 6 points behind Verstappen. That consistency can easily make the difference in the championship. Bahrain, this year, my goodness, you've got to give George kudos for that one. With a car that was failing on him, and he still got it to second, keeping Lando behind him. My God. So therefore, I think Russell having a not-so-great start does not equal failure. He's not failed at all. He has succeeded. He has thrived. He's making good on his junior talents and experience and credentials and glory, and then having to do it all at the back and then get back to the top again. There is no reason to think that Gabi wouldn't be able to do the same. And I think it's something that Oscar Piastri learnt too, albeit at double speed. And I doubt that Williams fans back in the day would have ever thought that he would be then going on to lead the effective works team Mercedes. And yeah, sure, you saw the cameo in Sakir, but that could have easily been explained away by critics to say, oh, well, he's only doing that because he was in the W11 and that's the best car in existence. Oh, he got lucky. And he only got 2 points anyway. He failed. Even though you have to remember, that was a puncture and Mercedes screwing up their pit stop due to a radio mix-up. But even then, he then went on in 2022. Look where he is now. Again, just because you have a mediocre or just forgettable first season, that's not the end of it. Or at least, most of the time, it's not the end of it. Fast forward to right now, and you've got Mattia Binotto heading Sauber with Jonathon Wheatley, with an environment and working force that is somehow in some kind of survival mode. Meaning that Bortoleto finds himself in a position uncannily similar to Russell's Williams stint, and also bears the brunt of his potential being dulled. Because let's be real, even though the Sauber isn't as much of a tractor as it was in 2024, it is still very much a nominee for F1's best tractor of 2025. It does have some things going for it. I mean, Nico was able to drag that car into the points, 6 of them in one go at the season opener, but very much it is pegged to the back. It is still in 10th place, albeit not that far from the likes of Alpine, which is still very strange to say. And just because he's not able to get it into Q3 or score a point round now doesn't necessarily mean that he sucks, because this is similar to what George and Toto were trying to do. Just get the guy on the grid and go from there. We're seeing the exact same thing with Gabi and Zach Brown. Zach essentially giving Sauber Bortoleto for free. There is no fee attached to it, according to McLaren, because Brown obviously uses this as a political pawn, which is unfortunate, but hey, opportunistic for Bortoleto because he's on the grid right now. You know, just to go to corner and say, you see, I take care of my drivers. I've got 3 McLaren drivers almost, even though Bortoleto is no longer affiliated with McLaren, but who knows what may happen in the next couple of years, am I right? And Sauber, yeah, it's a decent team to be at. They have a long history, but aside from a brief resurgence in 2022, they've mostly struggled, hitting rock bottom again in 2024. It's a tough environment for a newcomer, really. And also what doesn't help is that the rookies for this year are really kind of spread out and come with a wide range of testing mileage to boot. Out of all of the rookies this year, Bortoleto is the least prepared out of any of them, not being afforded an FP1 session as far as I can recall, and having only a little bit of TPC time shared with Hülkenberg before the season start in old machinery. His first sampling of an up-to-date F1 car came at the Abu Dhabi Young Driver Test, and then at winter testing for this year. So in comparison to the likes of Antonelli or Behrman, who were afforded thousands and thousands of miles of testing in the simulator and in actual cars, and then in many FP1 sessions, especially Behrman. You got the likes of Doohan and Colapinto being handed out testing opportunities with Alpine like it was sweets. Liam Lawson having extensive opportunities, his stints with AlphaTauri and VCarb. When you compare all of that to Bortoleto, he's had scraps, which does give Bortoleto some credit that he is able to mix it up with them despite that relatively poor level of testing. But it's still, all of this, a far cry from the likes of what Schumacher and co were able to do back in the 90s and 2000s. Lewis Hamilton even had more testing, around about 5,000 miles or so before 2007. That's over a season's worth of distance before he'd even started. Back in 2007, well more than one season. And also, in pre-season testing, he and Hülkenberg were mainly fighting just to escape the bottom of the timesheets, and as we saw in China especially, trying to make sure the car actually stayed on the road instead of just jackknifing off the track for some reason, because I think it just took a corner and then went nope. But let's just make it clear, an opportunity for a points finish this year is going to be very unlikely. It could happen, it's not impossible, but it is improbable. But it does mean that for the rest of this year, probably, Bortoleto will be very much near the back, and people will either just not give a damn about his name, or will just think, oh, he's just Logan Sargent and Zhou Guanyu all over again, very much what Russell had to deal with for the entirety of 2019. This is not the first time we've seen this in Formula 1, it's always known to be a waiting game for some. And quite frankly, it's a bit of a new experience to snap back to reality after 2 glorious years in Formula 3 and Formula 2, where he was the king of the world, that he won championships through consistency, that being a major linchpin in him being in Formula 1. Consistency is king. And it's precisely why patience from the outside world, especially within Europe, is vital. The good news is that Bortoleto seems to have embraced the challenge in the same methodical way Russell once did. Throughout the winter, he practically lived at Sauber's headquarters in Switzerland, logging countless hours in the simulator and integrating with the engineers very admirably. Here's what Gabi himself had to say to F1.com. Ahem. It's been very intense preparation work here at Sauber, coming here 2 or 3 times a week, focused doing a lot of simulator work, being with the engineers, understanding how they speak between each other, how they want me to speak with them, how I want them to speak with me. I want to be very close to them and create a very good relationship before the season starts. It's something I've always done, especially in the last 2 years with my teams in F2 and F3. So when we started the season in the first round, it looks like we have been together already for years. And that work ethic has not gone unnoticed, and it really does make a stark contrast to what happened with Lewis and Ferrari. I know it will get better for him, but it didn't get off to the best start, let's just say that. Sauber's new management, headed by Binotto and now Jonathon Wheatley as their team principal, they rate him highly, with Binotto reportedly delighted, very impressed with his attitude and feedback during his first test sessions. In fact, during that post-season Abu Dhabi Young Driver Test, his first actual chance driving a fresh Sauber car, Bortoleto caught everyone's attention by how calmly and politely he handled radio comms, even as he was learning the complex F1 procedures in only a day or 2. And according to Brazilian site UOL, he even stayed long after the test day had ended, poring over data, asking questions, even outlasting his seasoned teammate Nico Hülkenberg in the debrief room. Gabi, he stuck around. Yeah, okay, you might be thinking, oh, well, that's just a little bit of hearsay. It's a teensy little anecdote. But the fact is, though, is that they exist. It paints the picture of a man who is well older than his years would actually say, and that he is more than ready to take up this challenge and commit himself entirely. And that the team are thrilled to bits in having him. They are dedicated to him, and he is dedicated to them. And quite frankly, when you're right at the back, you all need to band together. Look how that managed to get McLaren through 2019. You're not finding out anecdotes about Bortoleto throwing a tantrum or leaving at the first opportunity or looking extremely glum. None of that. Whenever you see Gabi, he's usually got a smile, he's usually looking focused, he's determined, and he's not willing to let any little random tweak get the better of him. And quite frankly, I think he proved his maturity at Melbourne. You remember that whole thing where Helmut Marko was going around grading all of the rookies, saying, ah yes, Jack Doohan's a C-grade driver, Bortoleto's a B-grade driver. Yeah, Marko was absolutely ruthless, just praising his guy Hadjar, and then commenting that Bortoleto, oh, he won the championship, but he only won 3 races in 2 years, and my boy did much better. And yeah, but again, consistency is king. And also, Bortoleto's response, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you can easily look it up, it was gold. Yeah, Dr. Marko is a very smart person. Again, paraphrasing. Yeah, he's brought in many talented people into Formula One, but he's also brought in many untalented people. Oh. And oh yes, that he likes a challenge. No, he loves a challenge. Oh, I like this kid. I like him a lot. And what might help him is that he does have one significant advantage that Russell largely didn't have in his rookie days, or at least not for very long. A strong, present mentor figure in his teammate. Nico Hülkenberg will be his teammate for a good long while, him contracted to Audi through 2027. And I can imagine that the team, if it gets on really well, this pairing, will want to keep them for as long as possible. So long as Nico wants to stay with Audi, I think they'll probably keep him, unless they manage to be able to attract other people up and down the grid, and Nico maybe just want to retire, go back to sports car racing, because remember, he did win Le Mans with Porsche. Who knows, maybe if Audi decides to go back into World Endurance, Hülkenberg can jump ship and join them. And most importantly, despite his age, he's still got it. Look at what he was able to do with Haas in the 2 seasons he was there with them. Yes, it does pain me to say it, but replacing Schumacher with Hülkenberg was a good bet. It was one of the rare W's that Steiner had towards the end of his Haas tenure. And quite frankly, I think he's enjoying life again, because if I'm correct, then Hülkenberg and Bortoleto, this is the first time that Nico has a proper greenhorn rookie teammate. Not somebody who's had maybe a couple of years like he had with Sainz and whatnot. You can tell he's enjoying this experience in being the full-on mentor, the guiding light, because whenever you see the two of them together, Nico's having a great time being the uncle, and you just sense that he's feeling young again. He's naughty, he's impish, he's cheeky, and this camaraderie, it's infectious. Far less strained than it was with Bottas and Zhou, who quite frankly just had enough with Sauber, both of them recognising that it was completely not the team that they'd signed up for in 2022. You felt like these two were just mucking it together because, well, they only had each other. No one else in the team gave a damn about them. Nico's full of praise for the young Brazilian too, happily reporting that he's a really nice guy, smart kid, and fast as hell. This kind of public confidence from an established driver with a big fan presence, no one can really pin any negative points towards Hülkenberg. It can do wonders for a rookie's confidence, foster a good and solid working relationship. And behind the scenes, you can probably sense that they genuinely get on well together as people, much like how I can imagine that Robert and George were mucking it in together as best as they could with Williams, even though there wasn't much to offer. Now, even though Kubica had plenty to offer Russell and had beaten the odds getting back into high-level competitive motorsport despite his injury, in fact, really, it's actually mattered not since he's managed to do what he's able to do with Ferrari. But back in 2019, that was the beginning of his journey through full recovery. Russell gleaned what he could from Kubica's experience, but on track, he was usually well ahead of Robert. And what also didn't help George is that he only had the expertise of Robert for 1 year when he went over to become a reserve driver for Alfa Romeo with their partnership with Orlen. For 2020, Russell, in a teammate, had Nicholas Latifi, the GOAT, albeit a rookie, Russell, the senior of the two. So therefore, a lot of the development and progress he had to kind of forge for himself, as well as maybe the occasional bit of advice from an elder, if that. When you contrast this with Bortoleto, him and Nico could be around together as teammates for this season, next season, and maybe the season after that. And if on a given weekend Bortoleto can actually get close to or even beat Nico, that's immediate validation right there that he's getting a lot out of the car. And hey, if he's behind, then he's got a clear target to aim for. And the fact that Gabi has a multi-year contract, that is an absolutely huge deal, because not even Kimi Antonelli has that as of this recording. Of course, that is most likely to change anytime soon, because quite frankly, if you had a documentary made about you before you've barely gotten even to the European leg of your rookie season, then you're probably going to be around for a good long while, and you sense that Sauber and Nico are happy with him, and they have no plans to drop him anytime soon. And as we have seen with Alpine and Doohan, that's a huge weight off your mind if you can actually be sticking around. Now, beyond the technical and developmental angles, there's an emotional reason why so many fans are invested in Bortoleto's trajectory, and partly why I respect his gusto. Because may I remind you, he has got the entire country of Brazil behind him, and that in of itself, me just saying that, indicates a huge amount of pressure on his shoulders, which admittedly might be slightly lessened as we are witnessing through the junior ranks one Rafael Camara in F3 taking names after he took many names in Formula Regional. So as you can probably tell, Brazil is looking very, very chirpy at the moment that maybe it's all coming together for a brand new renaissance with Formula One. Because think about it, Brazil was once a powerhouse of natural talent with Emerson Fittipaldi leading the way, Nelson Piquet, before he got all cringe and crashgate with his son, and then Ayrton Senna, let's not forget that. But the last time that Brazil had won a world championship in Formula One was back in 1991 with Senna's final title. Yes, of course, Felipe Massa got admirably close and was champion for 30 seconds in 2008, but that was taken away from him by Lewis Hamilton, of course, and thanks, Timo. And that's not me casting shade on Rubinho either, because I really like Rubens. I like him a lot, and I like seeing that Eduardo, his son, is now rising through the ranks, and then you had Felipe Massa and his journey with Sauber and Ferrari before his championship campaign. We have seen plenty of good Brazilian drivers in the 2000s and whatnot, but after 2017 when Felipe Massa retired for a second time because, well, Bottas got the call up to Mercedes, so Felipe had to come back in again. There's nothing. We've only had Pietro Fittipaldi for a cameo after Romain Grosjean's accident in 2020, but we've not had a full-time driver in Formula One from Brazil since 2017. But now we do. And maybe in a couple of years we could have 2. Maybe 3 if Felipe Drugovich can finally get a seat. Now, for anyone not from the region, it might be a little hard to understand, but with that national excitement, it also comes with very high expectations. Because if you think the enthusiasm from British fans is intense and can easily give their drivers some pressure, just you wait, you've not seen anything yet. Because Brazil remembers the glory days of Senna's brilliance, Massa's spirited challenge of Hamilton. Bortoleto inevitably faces comparison to those icons, even in his first year. His every move will be logged, analysed, the pressure to eventually deliver results will start to burble and maybe rise in the background. It's all the more reason to remind ourselves that immediate results aren't the only measure of progress. And it's really pleasing me to hear this, that Emerson Fittipaldi has called upon other Brazilians to give Bortoleto some time, that we are very excited and that this may be the beginning of something new and sustainable and could see Brazilian drivers in Formula One for a good long time. Not just from Bortoleto, but maybe from Camara, maybe from Drugovich. Because he also acknowledges Fittipaldi that having one Brazilian driver is simply not enough. They need more. Put simply, Bortoleto is not the be-all and end-all, and so therefore you should not treat him as the be-all and end-all. He is just the opening act, and maybe could be the big star if he really rises to form, or gets his McLaren comeback, or maybe gets something even bigger, or maybe if Audi absolutely boss it. So, quite honestly, it'd be just wise to let him cook in the background instead of calling for him to be sacked already, and that is a really sad reflection of modern F1 fans. I don't mind brand new F1 fans, I welcome them, I really do. But this is a symptom of that, is that there is just a really low tolerance for rookies to find their feet, as we've seen many, many times. And if you don't get your social medias down pat, or have documentaries made about you, or you make a bit of a splash in terms of pulling a funny face, then you've really got to sell it on the track. And if you're in a really slow car, that's kind of hard to do. And I think the most constructive stance we can all have is just to understand where Bortoleto is right now. How little testing he has had when compared to the likes of Antonelli and Behrman, and even Doohan and Colapinto. Therefore, we should celebrate small milestones that he's able to achieve. A Q2 or 3 cameo here, a race finish ahead of a faster car there, a savvy defensive drive against a veteran. These are the building blocks of a great driver, even if they don't earn headlines. And I managed to go through the entire video without even mentioning that Fernando Alonso is his mentor and manager. And yes, of course, they had that little jokey moment in Jeddah when Bortoleto admittedly almost took him out, Alonso. But that little camaraderie they had, they laughed it off, and Bortoleto admitted his fault, he owned it, he didn't get fiery, angry with his manager, no, not at all. I will be here to cheer him on, so let's just give him all the support that he needs, like with all the other rookies. But make no mistake, if he has a really bad weekend, I will call him out on it, like I do with everyone else. Even if Piastri has a bad weekend, I will say something about it. And I think it's important to give them that time of day to really find their feet, rookies, because if you don't get the full picture. Because look at Piastri in 2023. He started off guarded and robotic in the wake of the Alpine controversy, but he did open up with time. Give Gabi some time, because one day, all of this, what we're seeing right now, will form the backbone of a breakout triumph that will feel all the more sweet for the patience that made it possible. So quite frankly, slow and steady could win the race for Gabi, much like how it is winning the race for George Russell at this very moment. And for every fan who kept the faith, including myself, it will be well worth the wait, because it was certainly well worth the wait in terms of my boy. Because I had to wait nearly a whole year for my piece on Oscar being Max's ultimate rival to fully mature. To watch that video from July last year and how prescient it's turned out to be, watch this video next, straight after this one.